symbolism, they all add up to key esoteric numbers like 13, 9, etc., because initiates created this. Every so often there are certain events and certain people which pull in all strands of the various elements I've talked about so far over these hours. And the assassination, because that's what it was, of Diana, Princess of Wales, had all these elements of bloodlines, of royalty, of secret societies, and of the symbolism of the secret societies in the actual assassination itself. In The Biggest Secret, I've gone into this in tremendous detail in one chapter in particular, and there is a video documentary planned of this Diana assassination and the background to it. Maybe it will even have been done and be available by the time you see this. So I'm not going to go into the Diana thing in great detail here because it's done elsewhere, but I just want to go through a few things. From close confidence of Diana, it's very clear that she realized after a while that she had been pulled in for a specific purpose. She used to call herself the Windsor broodmare. The Spencer family is an ancient bloodline which is interbred with many of the aristocratic families of Britain, of Europe, and of America. Spencers are distant cousins, for instance, of the Rockefellers. And she realized that they'd drawn her into the Windsor web because they wanted her genes. They wanted to fuse the Windsor genes with the Spencer genes to produce another version of a genetic hybrid with a particular genetic structure. And from the very start, it's clear when you look at the story and the information that she was pulled in and identified for this from a very, very early age. She was actually brought up on the Sandringham estate and knew the Queen and Prince Charles and stuff from a very early age. The Windsors are, this is the Queen here, an ancient reptile human bloodline. And I was kind of surprised, although my research was going that way, to be told that by a confidant of Diana that her nickname for the Windsors was the lizards or the reptiles. And she used to say, in all seriousness, they're not human. And she knew far more about this background by the time she died than people in the public domain would ever realize. And she'd certainly realized what the Windsors were about and where they came from. Now, this is a guy who has been going around saying that Diana and his son Dodi were assassinated. I haven't got time to go into why someone might feel it acceptable for their son to die in a road crash, but if you read The Biggest Secret, you can see some of the background to this. If we start judging whether something is possible by what we would do, we're going to lose the plot, because not everyone thinks like everyone else. And when you look at the background to Diana's assassination, the person that had complete control of her security and her movements in the crucial period, days leading up to it, but particularly on that specific day, was Mohammed al-Fayed. And when you look at his background, as I've said in The Biggest Secret, you know when Mohammed al-Fayed is trying to kid you, trying to tell you something that's not true because his lips are moving. It's the way you can see it, because this guy has lied his way through his whole economic and business career. And he's done exactly that over Diana's assassination. There was a guy that I've mentioned a number of times in my books called Tony Blair. Tony Blair was brought through by this brotherhood to become Prime Minister of Britain. And I have a contact who, for a long time, performed satanic ceremonies in which ritual human sacrifice took place of children and of adults. And one of the key places, which I've talked about in my books, is a place known as the Castle of Darkness in Belgium. In the late 80s, she says that at a ritual sacrifice that she performed was the Queen of England, which she's done sacrifices for many times, the Queen Mother, Tony Blair, who was then just a lower-ranked politician, and Mohammed al-Fayed, father of Dodi. And yet in the public arena, we get this royal family on one side and Dodi Fayed's father, Mohammed al-Fayed, on the other, when in fact they lock into the same controlling force. And he had control of her movements on the crucial day. There's the Isis symbol of ancient Egypt, very close to that headgear that he posed with for a British newspaper. Now again, if you're going to kind of follow the symbolism and the background to Diana's assassination, you have to go back into the ancient world. You can pick one of these one of the pure key reptile human bloodlines up in Troy, ancient Troy, which is what we now call Turkey. You can follow this bloodline through the Caucasus Mountains and into Europe and into what we call France. In fact, France is named after these people. They call themselves the Sicambrian Franks. And they had a royal offshoot, and eventually became known by this royal offshoot, called the Merovingians. And the Merovingians set up the city we call Paris. You're looking at a part of the modern Paris, which was the place that they established the original Paris. And they named the city after one of the people involved in the Trojan Wars, a guy called Prince Paris. And there's Notre Dame, Our Lady, Diana, Semiramis, Isis Cathedral. And this was where Paris kind of came out of with the Merovingians many, many centuries ago. Now, these Merovingians, Franks, Sicambrian Franks, worshipped the goddess Diana, who was one of the great goddesses of the ancient world. And they built underground chambers just outside the original Paris to do their sacrifices and ceremonies to the goddess Diana. Of course, as Paris has got bigger and bigger, the area of that sacrifice area for the goddess Diana is now modern Paris. And it's still an underground chamber. That point is called the Pont d'Alma Tunnel, where Diana died in 1997. And Diana is actually blood related to the Merovingian line. This is the Ritz Hotel, owned by Mohammed Al-Fayed, and all around the square, it's called the Vendome, you see at first floor level depictions in gold of that symbol I talked about a long time ago, the circle, the cross, and the sun on the center. And it comes from one of the French kings, one of the Louis, who was known as the Sun King, who built the Palace of Versailles. And in the back of the Palace of Versailles, in the grounds, is a depiction of the goddess Diana, which this aristocratic bloodline network very much focus on as one of their deities. Someone said, this is the Kennedy assassination here, something very true. When you're trying to understand who was behind an assassination, look at who had the power to remove the security at the crucial time. Because he said assassinations don't just happen, they are allowed to happen. And when you look at the footage taken on a video camera by a member of the public when Rabin, the Israeli prime minister, was assassinated, it's extraordinary. You have the line of soldiers lined up to protect Rabin as he came to his car, and in among them is the guy who killed him. As Rabin appears on this video, extraordinary sight, the soldiers just walk backwards, leaving the assassin on his own. Rabin walks past him, thank you very much, good night. And it's the same with the Kennedy assassination and so many others. This is the point where Kennedy was hit. This is Kennedy's car at the front. There's nobody on it. And yet you look at the car behind, which doesn't carry the President of the United States. There's 4 security guards and 2 outriders. If they'd have been there, of course, Kennedy could not have been killed by a bullet from outside because he was so well protected. But the whole thing was removed, the security, to allow it to happen. And it was the same in Paris on that night. This is the back entrance to the Ritz Hotel where the car left because it was decided by Mohammed Al-Fayed on the phone to his son Dodi from England that although she'd had a certain level of security all day, a Mercedes and a backup car, a Range Rover, that was suddenly, at the crucial time, going to be removed, and another Mercedes was brought in with no backup car and no security, apart from the Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard in the front seat. So suddenly, classic assassination, security is removed to allow it to happen. In the car that was driven away was this guy, Henri Paul, who's been the fall guy for it, or blamed on him. He is an asset, or was an asset, of British and French intelligence, had been for a long time, and he had 4 bank accounts which had considerable amounts of money